Hello, my name is Clara Maria Boanova, and I am sales manager at m&opartners. I hope that you and your family are safe and healthy. Welcome to our Technical Thursday. Every Thursday, 10 a.m. local time, we receive a different partner to present their solution for maritime and oil and gas industries. Today we have Epic with Smart-Trac, Efficiencies in eMustering. I would like to introduce you to our presenter. Shane Cunningham is the Business Development Manager for Epic. With over 80 years experience working within offshore safety, he understands the risks involved in an offshore environment and the significance that it is placed on safeguarding this workforce. After the presentation, we'll have some minutes for question and answers. I hope you all enjoy it. Thank you.
Thank you, Clara. And again, thank you everyone for joining. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you're joining us from. As Clara mentioned, I am Sean Cunningham, Business Development Manager at Epic. Now, what I'd like to do, firstly, I want to quickly split this into two parts. We're going to go quickly with a short 3-4 slide presentation, just giving a bit of background into Epic, why we do what we do and the sort of overarching benefits. And then we'll actually look at the technology itself, since it is Technical Thursdays after all. So we are the global POB and mustering specialists. And we first introduced SmartTrack back in the early 90s on an asset known as Regalia, which was a flotel, a floating hotel, somewhere in the region of 300 to 400 POB size. And that's really where Epic began to grow from the flotel markets. We had approximately 100% market share with flotels, mainly through ProSafe and others. And that allowed us to really promote our product to the platforms, drill ships, FPSOs, etc., through seeing how the system worked on the flotels. Now, with them being such high POBs, they put their trust in knowing that SmartTrack could do the best for them, both efficiently and from a safety perspective. And just touching on down here, SmartTrack has evolved to include other key parts as well as eMustering, such as the logistics, accommodation services as well. So I want to take a quick look here. Now, apologies if for anyone out with the UK, I just wanted to give an indication of what the UK requirements are from an HSE's perspective when it comes to muster areas. We've got a little blurb here. We won't read it all, but looking at the key parts in there, you know, people must be assigned to a muster area and know where it is. And there must be means for immediate evacuation and accounting on the person assigned to the particular muster areas. So there's a lot of emphasis there, you can see, on the accountability, ensuring we know where personnel are in an emergency. And the bottom sort of sentence really sums that up in providing the OIM and the emergency response team with the accurate information to allow them to make educated risk assessments. So in other words, that's letting you know where everybody is. Are we in a position to evacuate? Do we have any missing personnel? And all of this can be critical, especially in a sort of highly explosive environment such as a production platform or an FPSO, etc. So a bit of background or a bit of context perhaps on what traditional mustering methods look like. Now, here is a very common image which some of you who have offshore experience may have seen before. This is effectively a muster drill at lifeboats. You can see here we have approximately 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lifeboats, and all these personnel will have been assigned one of these lifeboats. It may look slightly organised, but there probably is some chaos in there as well in terms of being able to identify who's at each lifeboat. Are they using a head counting system? Are they using a T-card system? It can be a very laborious and time-consuming task ensuring you have the correct people for your lifeboat station. Each lifeboat station will have a pre-printed list of names. So the first downfall in that is, you know, have you got duplicated names on your list? Have you got people at your muster point that shouldn't be there? We'll see here, you know, miscommunication, length of processes. These can all have to be taken into account as kind of factors for how it's traditionally done. In terms of the strict lifeboat attendance, that comes down to each individual lifeboat having a lifeboat list. So if you're allocated lifeboat 1, then to ensure you're accounted for, you must go to lifeboat 1. So there's that extra pressure on each person ensuring they go to the correct place. So the final slide I just wanted to show is a quick overview of the benefits before we look at the software itself. So eMustering is effectively electronic mustering. Here is a very classic example of what we would show or install on an installation instead. This is what we have as an RFID card and a built-in scanner in this sort of either explosion-proof box or intrinsically safe box, or weatherproof box, should I say. And what that scan will allow to do is notify this person has mustered without the need of a T card, any person checking up on head counting, and this will go directly up to the heli admin office or control room to ensure that person's been picked up quicker. So in terms of the benefits, we're looking at quicker muster times, less human interaction, quick accountability, and an immediate overview on who is missing. So that was just a quick feel for why we do what we do and what we feel are the main benefits in an ever evolving industry from a technical perspective, and definitely technology. What we'll go to look at now is SmartTrack itself. So this is our home screen, if you will. This is our SmartTrack system. Very simply, we install this on installations with their own unique servers and scanners, so everything is kind of platform centric. Everything required will be based on the platform to be used individually. So in terms of sort of data protection, etc., that is all stored on the local server in situ. So there isn't any sort of data sharing out with that should be happening. So starting at the very beginning, this is our kind of main POB overview screen. I've added a couple of locations here. We've got an FPSO and an offshore support vessel, if we will. This could be a walk-to-work vessel, that kind of thing. This gives us our total field POB, and this is up to the second live. So as soon as you maybe leave a chopper or come across from the support vessel, you'll be allocated into the total POB. Now, with this being electronic, what it allows us to do is click straight into the FPSO section, and we now have a list of every individual that is currently on board and registered with a muster point and a bed on this FPSO, and that's almost instant. So we can see here where people are, their lifeboat, etc. We can also transfer to other locations, so this would automatically add them to the OSV POB as well. Now, if we click in here, in terms of the data, this allows us to store extensive data on any individuals and for most individuals. This is potentially excellent for looking at course expiry dates, looking at competency levels and seeing what qualifications people have for certain roles. If you're looking to book people offshore, ensuring that their tickets are all in date, these kind of things. So we can go into depths of information if required, but it just means that all the data and information is stored in one hub. Straight away, you'll see we don't have a spreadsheet in sight. There's no Word documents. It's all stored electronically via the server, if you will, that we would preload prior to any installation. So, as I say, this is our kind of main overview screen. On a sort of day-to-day basis, this would be what would be on show. We can see how many people are residents out of the full number. We've got visitors here. So there's 4 who are actually based on the OSV, who are currently on the FPSO. Now, that could be for work. So straight away in an emergency, we know if there's people in different locations from where they should be. And again, we can simply click into that person. We can find out what shift they're on, what accommodation they should be in, and muster points, etc. So there's a raft of information that we can use. So we'll see along the top here, we've got the different modules, if you will. We'll come to mustering last. We'll kind of run through a basic process of arriving offshore, registering, and then going through the muster scenario. So first off, we have the travel module, and as simple as it sounds, this is really a way of producing and curating flights for arrivals and departures as simply as possible. So we'll see here we have a scheduled flight pre-made. So all we have to do is select passengers from the passenger list that we can add to this list if need be. We have 2 here. We can update by adding people to the list. That will simply add them to the manifest, if you will, for that flight. We choose the mode of transport, the day, where they're going and where they're from and where they're going to in terms of destination. And all we would do is change that to arrived once they had arrived on board. So again, there's no need for any spreadsheets that can be accidentally duplicated. We cannot duplicate people's names on here. We can't assign them to two flights at once. So once they've been arrived on one, they can't then be arrived on another. So that ensures that we have accurate POB status at all times. So arriving that flight, as we shown earlier, would automatically update that POB status screen to have a real-time POB. And also similar for departures as well, we do exactly the same thing. We have our flights made here. We simply choose from the drop down the people to include on there, any stops that may come in there, and any freight that we may be taking back as well, or via another platform. So, we look at the feedback from our clients with these, and the numbers that kind of fly around on average is you could be looking at sort of 30 to 40% saving on administration time alone. So when we look at the efficiencies of Smart-Trac, straight away we're not looking at multiple documents, we're not looking at multiple folders. It's all stored in a very centric place here. And again, the travel concept is just an added module to help keep everything centralized in this one system. Similar to the travel, the hotel function works in exactly the same way. Prior to any travel offshore, beds would be automatically allocated. If we wanted to look at moving people in different beds, then we can do so by choosing from the drop down, choose which bed they're in, and then that simply updates as well. And with that would become an allocated muster point and a lifeboat as well. Now these would all be based on location. Now it works both ways. If, for example, you have certain people who have certain beds every time they do come offshore, the system can pre-populate that if available. So that same person can have that familiarity of having the same cabin every time they arrive for their shift. Now, when arriving offshore, you'll notice here we have the card numbers, and on the brief presentation I showed you, I mentioned RFID cards. Every person that arrives offshore and has then arrived on the system will receive an RFID card. Now, this will then store their personal data via the server on the card for their duration. And that card must then be worn at all times. That's to be used for any transit between locations and for any mustering and evacuation that may happen. So that would be worn on a lanyard around the neck. If we quickly go back to our presentation, we can show here, we have our lanyard yo-yo here, and we have our card in a little holder. Now that would be worn at all times during the duration of the stay. It can also be worn just on a clip, just anywhere reachable. So if you are transferring or mustering, it's easy to grab and scan. And it works very similar to an electronic bank card, if you will, in terms of the RFID technology, picks up the signal, runs that back to the server, and that then updates our POB screen with that person. So that stays for the duration. Printed on the card, we also have their own lifeboat number and their bed as well. So during an emergency, if there's a panic and they're not sure where they should be, one quick look at the card tells them they should be heading to muster point 2 or lifeboat 2, depending on the severity of the emergency. So in terms of those extra modules, those really help to consolidate the system and provide a lot more, or take away a lot of the labour intensive tasks that we do have. So there isn't multiple systems trying to talk to each other. It's very centralised, organised and focused in one place. Another strong feature of the system is the reporting. Now, at the end of the day, data is data, it's how we manage it. But through transactions of the cards and moving and allocating people, lifeboats, beds, etc., we're able to compile multiple reports from many different scenarios. We'll see here, for example, daily resident by employer. Now that's important if you have a lot of contractors. You can look to sort of consolidate that on a monthly basis. And what that allows us to do, apologies if the internet connection is quite slow here, but we can run some of these reports and it allow us to know how many days people have been on, which employer they're with. So on a monthly basis, if you're looking to invoice, you can have a breakdown of the days that your employers have been there. And that gives us the opportunity to export that via PDF, Word and Excel for sort of further use. And we can see there straight away, we have the list of companies that can be manipulated in any way. Now this isn't a hard and fast set of reports. We have the ability, our own software team who wrote this program, have the ability to modify these to specific client requirements. So it's something we can also do. You know, we see this as a collaboration. If there's something on here that isn't included that you want to, we can definitely look at things like that. But it's really trying to find the best ways to maximize the data you have, to make sort of the running of the sort of day-to-day operations as smooth and as efficient as possible. And again, on the personnel database, this is where we can set up people on the database. We would tend to work with the clients and pre-populate with as many as we can. If you have the odd person who's a new contractor or a new person on site, it really is a simple case of new, adding in their data information, and then that's them stored on the server database permanently. So next time it comes to adding them to a flight, or a departing or arriving flight, they're already stored on the system, and it's a couple of clicks to get them introduced. So those are the kind of extra benefits we see with SmartTrack itself. As I say, it's all about trying to consolidate into one system and really focus on the efficiencies that come with it. Looking beyond that then and focusing on the main use and the main reason we wanted to produce this system is the mustering side. Now, as I mentioned to you before, every person is allocated a lifeboat and muster point when given the card. So their card will be their mustering point, and for whatever use throughout their stay, 2-3 week duration, whatever that may be. So what we'll do is we'll just do a quick simulation, and just to give you a flavour of how the muster process works, and then look at some of the facts and figures that we've received from our clients in terms of, you know, how that benefits them more. So what we've done here is started in a muster. Now this can be done automatically. We can actually set this up to the general alarm. So if there was an alarm sounded, the system would be triggered and automatically start straight away. We have the counter going, so we can accurately record the time taken to do a full muster. Now we'll focus on the FPSO for this one. You'll see here straight away, we know how many people are missing. We know how many people should be at each individual lifeboat that's currently in operation, and also the capacity for each of the lifeboats as well. So if we look firstly at lifeboat 1, we have the 29 people who arrived on board and were allocated both bed and lifeboat, and we have here lifeboat 1. So clearly we're doing this as a simulation. We'll just pretend we're going up and scanning that muster point scanner for lifeboat 1. And what we'll see is 2 people have now mustered. Now that was instantaneous. I believe it's every 6 seconds or so that this will refresh itself. So straight away, we have those 2 people that we mustered. It'll tell us who they are and where they mustered straight away, so we know that. And again, if we scroll down, we can see here total mustered, and they mustered okay, meaning they mustered at their muster point. Now, a big focus or a big point we like to highlight in terms of the benefits of this system is we don't want to restrict people to their own lifeboat station should it not be safe to do so. You could be at the opposite side of the FPSO and there could be a fire broke out and it's not possible for you to get across. Using traditional methods, there's no accountability for your name because that's on another lifeboat list, and that person's going to have to manually either call up and ensure your name is written down along with the other 30-40 people. What we have here is the ability to, say on lifeboat 1 for example, we can actually change where they scan to lifeboat 2. So if we confirm one person at lifeboat 2, that person will still technically be classed as mustered, as we've seen there, but what it shows is that we've got someone from lifeboat station 1 mustered elsewhere, and someone at lifeboat station 2 that's come from elsewhere. Double clicking into that will then give us the name of that person, and again, if need be, depending, we can then go in and access all that person's data and information as well. So straight away, we are really taking the labour element out of the muster scenario. We want people to focus as much as possible on getting to their muster point without having to worry about where they're going, what happens when they get there, ensuring their T cards may be facing the right way or that they can be seen by the muster checker. All that is kind of taken out of their hands based on the fact we can do this electronically. So sort of during a live evacuation or muster, this would be the screen that is kind of most favoured, if we will. Straight away it gives us live numbers, and this would count down as this one would count up. And at any point you can click in and get an indication of the people that are missing. And once again, we also have the ability to go in and know that this person is on night shift, which bed they could be in, they could be falling asleep, and which lifeboat and muster point they should be at. So straight away, we have that ability to either start a search if need be, if this person's missing for too long, or at least know where they could be, and put out that search if required. So it really is trying to cover all bases, and going back to the initial slide I showed on accountability, this gives us that accountability for personnel and allows the OIM to make quicker decisions based on that. Now, going back quickly to this, say for example you do, a common question I've had quite a lot is what happens if we do lose a card. That's not really an issue at all, because you can have your muster or someone, including yourself, from each lifeboat could dial up and say, it's Friday here, I am actually at lifeboat 1, can you put me in there and scan me in, and we can automatically put that person on. It doesn't happen very often, but it's good to know we've all got that quick reactive way of doing that should that happen, and that no one can miss out if they misplace their card or don't have it. So that's a quicker way. So I've, through some feedback of clients or prospective clients that I've dealt with in my time at Epic, we've had some scenarios on various different assets where they have drills where they have a missing person, and sometimes it's taken up to almost an hour to actually identify who the missing person is. They have to go through their Vantage list, they have to check their lifeboat list, they have to check who arrived that day. There's a lot of administrative tasks almost required to do to get to that point. What we've kind of done here is ensure that it's almost instantaneous in that way. You've gone from an hour to mere seconds. And when you're talking about people's lives, that's a lot of time. And what is the cost of a life? That's the kind of thing we look at, and what will it take to ensure the safety of these people. So if we now go from there to an evacuation, it just effectively carries on the process. What we'll have is the 4 people mustered at a lifeboat. What would happen, of course, you'll see here lifeboat 4 is out of commission, but you would receive a green light if you'd either reached capacity or the total number of people required at that lifeboat had been received there and allocated there. Now we have a heli admin position here. If we'd mustered anyone at the emergency point there, we could evacuate them here. What we also then have the ability to do is evacuate a lifeboat at any time. So when it comes to this is very important, because as I mentioned earlier, you'll have set lists at each lifeboat station. Now these are fixed, so if you have a last minute change, there's no way you're able to print off a new list in time. What this actually gives us is the actual accurate passenger list of everybody that's mustered at that lifeboat. Now, as we showed earlier, we mustered people at lifeboat 2 and then vice versa for lifeboat 1. So this will give us that real accurate list. So when the emergency services and emergency response team get this information, they know exactly who's in each lifeboat should it arrive on shore, rather than going by the initial list and having to identify who's arrived and who hasn't. And again, a fairly straightforward couple of clicks. We simply give them the transport type that they'll be arriving by. We can print that manifest, send it electronically, and then evacuate that boat instantly. And that would be that covered. So that's effectively, on a sort of high overview of the system. Again, once we come to ending an evacuation, we get the option to print reports. We find that the data side of things is still very important in terms of, looking back and analysing how the performance went during certain musters, where they could have improved, how quickly people mustered, how often they mustered at their correct muster point. These kind of things are all very important. And again, you can print off reports. These can be done in Excel, Word, PDF, and it's all split up. It gives them the time that they mustered, where they mustered from, all this kind of. There we have our differentiation between the current location and who mustered, and again the missing list as well. So from a data perspective, it's comprehensive. From a safety perspective, it's efficient and quick, and then from a cost perspective, you're looking at your muster times being reduced drastically. We look at some of our clients working on sort of POBs up in the 700-800s up to 1,000 on different complexes that have multiple assets with bridge links, etc. And we've had clients with around 1,000 POB mark mustering in 8 minutes. And that's consistent numbers as well. That's not one-offs. That's the sort of weekly consistent figures. Those are predetermined drills. Those are sort of emergency drills. Those are in the middle of the night drills. So it does show the benefit of having that. And we look at the average cost of a man-hour offshore at roughly 6 to 8 British pounds per hour, the savings on cutting a muster time down from 1 hour down to 10 minutes could be massive in terms of a yearly cost, and in terms of a system. So yeah, I really just wanted to give a flavour of what the system does. I appreciate there may be some questions, so we can look at that shortly. And really, this to try and gauge sort of interest in the product, and if anyone's have any experience of using a system similar in the market, people that have maybe been used to the traditional mustering methods and weren't aware that there are ways of doing it better, more efficiently, economically, and more safer, that there is. And yeah, I'd love to take these conversations further with anyone that would like to, and really delve deep into how they do their operations and how Epic can help with the SmartTrack system. So yeah, I'd like to say thank you for your time on listening to that presentation, and yeah, if there's any questions, if we can go to them now.
And now Sean will answer questions from the Q&A panel.
Okay, I can see here. We have some questions here. We have a few. Oh, there's quite a good few actually. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll just start at the top. I'll read the question out and provide an answer. They're all anonymous, so we'll just, if you can remember what question you asked for your answer here. How detailed can you monitor people's movement? Good question. In terms of how detailed we can do that, it's almost down to the second. A very common one for us is bridge movements. So if you're moving between platforms, you scan your card crossing the bridge, and it can instantaneously add you to the other POB of the next installation. We don't tend to monitor on a 24-hour basis people's individual movements up and down staircases, etc. It's not really for that purpose. It's more to actually look at the efficiencies of people moving between locations, knowing their location if they change at any point, and for a mustering perspective. One of our clients did come up with a great suggestion, and this is where we try and go down the collaborative approaches. We have what's called a web scanner that we set up in meal rooms as a meal counter as well. What this allows us to do is several benefits to that, is setting up a small scanner in the meal rooms or the mess. So every time a person comes for their lunch or dinner or breakfast, they scan their card and take their food. So for several reasons, this can be a benefit. One, it's letting you count how many meals are being eaten per day to ensure it's the right quantities, and sort of for billing purposes, that side of it. And also allowing you to see that people are going to the mess room. People are logging and being managed at that point. Obviously, being offshore is a very difficult and lonely place for some people, especially for weeks on end. So being able to ensure their sort of health from a mental perspective, that they're still attending their meals, they're not staying in their cabins all day, then that can flag up things like that. So that's really what we try and use the system for, more of a welfare as opposed to tracking the every sort of minute of the day movement. So I hope that kind of helps them there. Can you integrate with example a Flotel's data of POB? Yes, and we do have many different scenarios where we've done that. A lot of the time, maybe for hookup projects, we would have a production platform coming online. We can set up the connection between the production platform and the Flotel, and we can also look to add in some scanners as well. So crossing the bridge, we can monitor who's moving between locations, and the muster times and stuff like that as well. So we have a sort of mirror system, if you will, or replication modules that we can add in, and that can replicate the data between the assets as well. So they can either both see both sets, their own individual set of data, or an overarching sort of complex data, so you can know where people are at each time. So, and again, that's where a lot of our business in the past has come from. The Flotels have come alongside, and that can, people crossing the bridge, their muster time is being reduced, gets a lot of the operators excited by this, and then they come to us and say, right, we want this as a permanent solution as well. And that has seen us have a lot of success in the sort of production and fixed asset industry as well. Do you have examples of solutions implemented by the oil company, so all units below use the Epic solutions between units? That's an interesting question. I presume units there are assets. So again, we'll take a Flotel company as a good example. Each individual asset, again, mainly down to sort of data protection and the way they kind of operate, we keep the data centralized to each asset. If, for example, there's a strong connection between the assets and an onshore location, then we can look at providing direct feeds back to a control room office, for example, where on screen you could monitor the 5 or 6, however many locations you have, and monitor each individual sort of status of their POB, if you will. And that can be a view only. You could manage Smart-Trac from this location. Again, using the mirroring or replication modules, this can allow you to either control or just monitor each of the POBs from a sort of centralized point. And again, this can be really good for control if they're doing dual scenarios where we have musters, etc., going on at different times of the day. They can tune in and view it from an onshore location and ensure this is all happening correctly. So that's a possibility. We have had clients inquire about that, and again, it's fairly straightforward for us to link a feed back onshore to ensure you've got that connectivity offshore as well, so you can monitor it as well. What's the minimum and maximum number of people for the system? Effectively, there isn't one to a degree, because it's all sort of data, sort of server centric on board. It really would depend on the size of that to a degree. For an example, we have systems operating up near 1,000 POB and some down at merely 30 POB. And again, people are seeing benefits across all different sizes of platforms in different locations. So there isn't really a minimum. Yeah, I'd like to think, you know, your kind of 30 plus is really where you start to see the benefits, where you maybe have multiple flights or people moving on a daily basis. It helps to track and control a lot of the movements a lot cleanly, if you will. But yeah, we can go way up into, you know, we're potentially looking at projects in the future pipelines that are several thousands that will be on site. And again, because it all comes down to the scanners and the sort of data back and forward between the server, you know, it's a clean connection, then yeah, we can manage as many as possible. Do you need to scan with RFID? Do you have armrest solution, and if not, why? So that's a good question. Firstly, the RFID does not have to be a card. We've had that question many times from clients who have signed up looking at different ways of doing this. It can be in any format as long as it's easy accessible and sort of manageable in an offshore environment. So watches are one that can be seen as fairly a good alternative, as long as they have, you know, break-free straps should it be caught in any machinery, that kind of thing. However, you mentioned that we do find that, you know, within a couple of weeks of people managing with the lanyards and the RFID cards, that they tend to stick to that. And I think almost all sites have RFID cards. We have offered watches as an alternative, and for a couple of projects that are upcoming over the next 12 months, we are proposing a watch solution with an RFID chip for them. But yeah, historically, the RFID cards do seem to have the best feedback. And when you mentioned they're scanning with RFID, I presume on that point you're maybe looking at a sort of hands-free where you don't have to scan at all. Now that comes with its own set of challenges. That can be known as sort of RTLS, or real-time location services and tracking. That requires a lot more infrastructure on site in terms of antennas, ensuring signals can be met between different points and aerials and stuff like that. And that can not only be costly, but can also interfere quite a lot depending on the size of the platform. Another thing with sort of hands-free is you don't get that positive contact or positive feedback. As I showed earlier for the picture example of the guy scanning on the card, once he scanned his card, that screen will come up with his name, his card number or lifeboat number, and acknowledged, red or green, depending on if it's worked or not. Hands-free, you don't have any physical actions, meaning that, you know, at certain times you could not know if you've been captured by a scan. You could be in a position where you're standing there and you don't know for sure if you've been allocated. And again, that can be a worry too. So it's down to the accuracy. The image I showed earlier as well, with that many people congregating in a small space with a lot of people in one area and not a lot of room to move about, the signals could get lost and trapped and blocked by people themselves, as we're nearly 8% water. Then that does take in a lot of factors in terms of the signal getting lost in between maybe little trackers that are held on from signals and stuff like that. So in all honesty, we have looked at it. We are currently probably piloting 5 or 6 different solutions beyond RFID, but as a company and from what we're trying to promote, we don't feel they're 100% accurate to produce into the market yet. And it's as simple as that, especially for something as critical as a mustering solution. It needs to work. And as far as we're concerned, if you scan your card, then 100% of the time that will work. As long as the connection's there and the card is scanned, then you're almost guaranteed to have that, that positive feedback and that acknowledgement on the system. The data transfer for onshore remote access is heavy because we don't have fast data connections. That's fairly technical and probably something I could get more information on the size of what the connection needs to be at a minimum. If you wouldn't mind passing your details perhaps at the end of this call, we can maybe facilitate a conversation on that. I wouldn't want to give anything inaccurate from a technical perspective on that. But yeah, if you could pass on your information, we can look to see it, maybe what the connection is and what the minimum requirement is in terms of bandwidth or anything like that in terms of securing that. We do have a lot of clients that look at onshore solutions and just connecting into sort of VPNs and things like that. So again, if we can maybe touch base after this call, I can look to get some more info and get you an accurate solution on that. Has the system ever been deployed in Brazil waters? Yes, it has. Effectively, this is what's led us to working with M&O/Ulstein in trying to promote ourselves further. We have FPSOs and flotels in the Brazilian waters. Again, we can look more into the clients we work with offline if you wish, and I can delve more information on that. But we do have live systems and flotels, FPSOs working in the Brazilian waters. And again, what we want to do is kind of use them as benchmarks and sort of testimonials to help promote further into the Brazilian market, where there is a lot of future builds happening and activity, and really want to try and push the Epic Smart-Trac system into this area. So again, if you'd like to know more about our testimonials and who we've worked with, I'd happily like to take that conversation offline after as well. So Letitia, that's the questions complete on there. So yeah, over to you.
Yes, thank you for your participation, and see you next Thursday at 10 p.m. Thank you, and 10 a.m. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.